Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're a new subscriber, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alicia, and if you're a returning subscriber, then welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a how I studied for microbiology, and basically any tips that I can give out to you guys, to those who are currently taking microbiology, to those that are planning to take microbiology. So if you do want to know more on how I studied and any tips that I can give out to you guys, then please keep on watching. Okay, you guys, so when it comes to studying for microbiology, it's different. I feel like microbiology was more about like memorizing compared to how it was for AMP1 and AMP2. I know a lot of schools out there, they make you take anatomy and physiology 1 and 2 first in order for you to go on to microbiology. That's how it was for my school. Like we needed to complete our AMP 1 and 2 first before we can even get into microbiology. They also required us to take a chemistry course in order for us to take microbiology, but that's how it worked out for my school. My first step that I can give out for you guys is for you to read your textbook or PowerPoint notes before you even go to class. I feel like, I know I have said this like millions of times, but you know, I feel like if you read your textbook or you just skim through your textbook or your PowerPoint notes, you kind of get like an idea of what your professor is going to be talking about, and you won't be clueless once you get into class and your professor starts talking about like these certain types of diseases, and you're just like, why is he going over this? It's happened to me before, and you know, I would never read my PowerPoints or never skim through my textbook. I would always just, you know, go into class, and as I was like just writing notes, I'll be like, what is he even talking about? But you know, but if that ever happens to you, and you know, I know there's people out there that don't really have time to like, you know, skim or look over their PowerPoint notes before going into class, I would recommend for you guys to record your lectures if your professor lets you. My professor didn't really care. He would let us record his lectures and stuff like that. Another thing is our class was provided with case studies, and you know, probably like enter a picture of what my microbiology textbook looked like. Okay, so that was my textbook. I'm hoping you guys do not mind the fan in the background, but you know, with like all these lights, it's like kind of getting hot in this room with you guys, so I'm hoping you guys do not mind the fan in the background. But like how I was telling you guys, as you guys saw, that was my microbiology textbook. That was the textbook that my professor required us to study from. I would only use that textbook for case studies. You know, our professor, he, you know, provided us with case studies every week, and you know, sometimes there were our quizzes and stuff like that, and I feel like those helped out a lot, just because, you know, it kind of like gives you like scenario questions, and you know, it kind of like gets you into like nursing school related questions, if that makes sense. Just because, you know, once you get into nursing school, you're going to be doing like case scenario questions, you're going to be doing case studies and stuff like that, and you know, basically our professor just wanted to give us case studies, and I feel like those helped out tremendously before I even took a pathophysiology. But you know, if your professor doesn't really provide you with case studies, then what I would do is like, you know, I know in the textbook, in my textbook, it would give us like a scenario question where the chapter even started, or before the chapter even started, and I feel like that helped out for me personally, just because you kind of got an idea of what the chapter was going to be talking about and stuff like that. Now for exams, how I studied for my exams was I used a textbook, of course, and you know, I would go on Quizlet and do flashcards. I feel like how I told you guys, this class is about like memorizing and, you know, just repeating yourself and doing Quizlet. You know, Quizlet was my best friend for this class. I would just, you know, type in all my slides from my PowerPoints onto Quizlet, and you know, I would just test myself, and I feel like that helped me out tremendously. Also, how I would study was I would, study with our study guide. For our class, personally, our professor, he would give us end of the chapter questions, which was basically questions that he would pull out of the exam, or like similar type of questions, and he would send us these type of questions and we would fill them out. As you guys can see, this is what it looks like, and it's just simple questions, like for example, what structure is not present in all viruses? The envelope, important cell wall of gram-negative, lipopolysaccharide, and what do we call infection that has alternating periods of activity with symptoms and without symptoms? Lysogenic phase of latent. And he basically, like, as you guys can see, I think this is just one chapter. I have no clue what chapter this is, but I would try my best to always answer these questions, because like how I said, half of the time these questions were on my exams, and this is a study guide that my professor would sent out to us, but he would basically send it out after like every time we were done with the chapter. So I feel like that was a good thing, just because we started on our study guide early. You can just like start reviewing it, you can go on Quizlet, start studying for that chapter, and once the exam came, we didn't really have like a study guide. These were our study guides that our professor personally provided for our class. Also, how I studied for this class was I had the end of the chapter questions, which were questions pulled out of the textbook. It was a website. If I can find the website, I'll probably link it down below for you guys, but I'll try my best to find that website. And I would do those questions. I think it was like around 25 questions, and they were related to the chapter of the book, and it was basically multiple choice questions. I think I do have an example of how it looked like. Let me see if I can show you guys. Okay, you guys, so this was an example of how the end of the chapter questions look like, and as you guys can see, this is my textbook. And like how I said, if I can find the website for you guys, I'll probably like link it down below. But it's basically just there's a lot on this website, but us personally, for our class, we only had to do the end of the chapter questions, which were the chapter quizzes. There were a total of 25 questions, and multiple choice, and it would tell you how many you had correct, and how many you didn't get correct. We have to turn that in for points. But like how I said, I would also use this just because when it would come to the exams, I would always do the end of the chapter questions, and it would kind of be like, it would kind of give me an idea of how my exam was going to be like, if I needed to focus on studying more for this chapter. And it did help me out. If I did end up missing more than a certain amount, I would go back to my textbook, read that part again, and ask myself like, what is it asking. Another thing that I would study for my exams is I would basically just say it out loud when it would come to studying. Of course, I would use Quizlet, and once I was done with Quizlet, I would go back to the study guide, and I'll just basically like ask myself the question, and then I'll be like, okay, what is it? And basically I'll say it out loud. That's how I personally learn the most and how I study. Everybody's study routine is different, so do what works best for you. I was not in a study group, for any of you guys that were wondering, and I did perfectly fine in this class, just because I used a lot of resources out there and stuff like that. Now on for lecture, for any of you guys that were wondering, like how I said, I would always skim through my PowerPoints or my textbook. I would of course print out my PowerPoints in the beginning of the semester. I would print them out, and then I would see like a lot of people bring in their laptops and they would just write their notes on PowerPoint, and that's what I started to do, just because I felt like I was wasting so much paper. And I had to print out so much paper for this class. Like, this binder is full of material that I had to turn in for this microbiology class, you guys. So I was just like, I'm done wasting paper. Like, we had to print out everything, and this class was just too much. So I started to write my notes on PowerPoint. I know on PowerPoint there's a section where it says notes, and that's what I would type in my notes. Of course I would record. I would always try to sit in like the first 3 rows, just because I feel like for me personally, you are more focused. I feel like you won't get distracted from you like looking at other people's like computer screen. I know that's a distraction, or people, you know, talking and stuff like that. You know, so try your best to sit in like the first 3 rows. So like I was saying, for lecture, I would of course, you know, just type in my notes, anything that my professor would repeat. He would give us like a lot of case scenario questions, and you know, he would like just repeat it, and you know, he will kind of give us like a hint, and he'll tell us like, oh, this might be on your exam. So I would like write it down, or like I would circle that section, or like I would just highlight it, and you know, for me to know that that's the slide that I need to focus on. So that was a good thing about my professor. Like he would always give us hints, and he would tell us like, oh, you really need to focus on this chapter, because the majority of the exam is going to be on this chapter. So that's how it was for lecture for me. Of course, we did have quizzes. They were on the iClicker. I do not know if you guys are familiar with the iClicker, but we had our quizzes on the iClicker. There were a total of 10 questions, and sometimes we had up to 4 chapters for it only being 10 questions. So you know, damn right I would use the study guides, because like half of the time he would have already sent us these study guides, and you know, I would just review from that. I would look at my PowerPoint notes, and you know, just use Quizlet, and of course read the textbook, and I would do well on my quizzes. So now on to lab. So this is a little disclaimer. We only had 1 lab practical. I know for those that do take, I know for those who are currently taking microbiology, you probably have like up to 2 to 3 lab practicals per semester, but for us personally, we only had 1 lab practical, and that was our final lab practical. So how it would be for us for lab is we would have labs 1 day out of the week. Of course, I would go to microbiology, you guys, on Mondays and Wednesdays, which is really well for my school, but that's how it was set up for the school that I took this class at, and it was a total of 3 hours, which is a lot, but you know, I feel like it worked out well for my schedule personally, just because I know there's schools out there that they offer lecture twice a week, and then you have to attend lab once a week for 3 hours, which I feel like is just a lot. So we had a lab on Mondays, and Wednesdays we basically just focused on lecture and stuff like that. So now on to lab. We of course did have lots of labs, which I really enjoyed. I feel like I enjoyed more of these labs than I did for anatomy and physiology, just because you know, you are looking at organisms, you're doing slides, and you know, you're looking at slides under the microscope. You kind of get an idea of what you're looking for. But how my labs look like, how I was telling you guys, we had labs every Monday, and these were my slides. We had to take pictures of our slides. So I think this was our first lab where we had to take a total of 12 pictures of different organisms, and you know, thank God I had a lab partner that would help me out. So if you guys can get yourself a lab partner, that will help you out tremendously, just because you know, looking at 12 slides in 1 hour was just a lot for us. But you know, half of the time me and my lab partner would just, you know, tell each other like, oh, you're gonna do 6 slides, and I would do like the other 6. So we basically would just, you know, work together, and I would just tell her like, try to take as many pictures of the same slide as you can, just because you know, it's really hard to like focus your camera on the microscope. So we would just, you know, go back and forth. She would take pictures of those 6 slides, and I would take the other pictures of like the other 6 slides, and of course we would just, you know, text each other the slides, and we would come up with our, you know, pictures. As you guys can see, for our labs personally, we had to, you know, color them, and then we had to label what it was. You know, we had to color it, and you know, that takes a lot of time, and I think, yeah, and it takes a lot of time, and you know, this was how our labs looked like. I would print them out before class. Like it was like a requirement for lab. Like if we did not have it printed out, we could not be on our phones. So I would always print out my labs for the day, and you know, it came with the type of materials we needed, what we were going to do in lab that day, and of course I would always, you know, just, you know, skim through it, and I'll be like, okay, today we're going to be working with knowing how to wash our hands, and we're going to be using a black light to see if we washed our hands the correct way. So I would kind of get like an idea of how what lab was going to be about. So if your school provides you with like a lab book, I would just, you know, just skim through it just so you can kind of get an idea what you're going to be doing and stuff like that. And of course we always had to do, on top of doing these pictures, you guys, we had to, you know, do a lab report, which is basically like our instructions, or like what we did and basically what we learned for that lab. So that's how it was for us for lab. And for lab practicals, for any of you guys that were wondering like, how did you study for your lab practical, I know for every schools out there is different. I know you guys have stations set up in your lab, and you have to like look at slides, you have to be able to identify them and what they are, and I know that can kind of be tricky for you guys. So for us, we did not have to look at slides. We had to create the slides, you guys. We had to create the slides step by step, and it was a total of 3 sites that we had to create, so it wasn't really a lot. I did get told by like a friend that took microbiology like in a different school that they basically had to identify the slides. They had to identify what was the shape, if it was Staph aureus or if it was E. coli. Like they had to identify it by like the shape and stuff like that. We did not have to do that, so that was like a good thing, and I'm just putting that disclaimer out there. But I feel like when it would come for, I feel like if you do have those type of lab practicals, like how I said, get yourself a lab partner, and you know, when you guys are doing slides, just take pictures of the slides, like put those slides under the microscope, them up to the highest power using oil, and take pictures, as many pictures as you can of all those slides if you can, and you know, you have those as references to look back at when it comes to you taking your lab practicals. Just because I know lab practicals are a lot, you guys aren't doing like, you know, doing sites that week in your microbiology lab, then I would just, you know, try to understand what you guys were doing in that lab for that week and what your professor was going over. I'm hoping I do make sense, but like how I said, for us, we only had to do 3 sites, and and we basically had to do them step by step, and we had to put them under like the microscope. Half of the time we had to use high power and use oil, and you know, our professor would come and he would look under like the microscope, and then that's for our lab practical. And you know, I know some of you guys are probably thinking like, wow, your lab practical was so easy, but you know, it was just a lot, just because, you know, we had to memorize all these steps. And then on top of that, we had like a 20 question quiz that we had to tell you guys this about lab. Let's just say you do not know how to do slides, you weren't paying attention in class. I would go on YouTube and, you know, type the slide that I had to do. This is what I had to do for my lab practical. Of course, like how I told you guys, we only had to do 3 slides, and you know, those 3 slides, there's like a lot of steps, and half of the time I know we all get like test anxiety. I know I do, and we mess up or we forget a step. So basically what I did, in order for me to learn how to do those 3 slides step by step, I would go on YouTube. You guys. YouTube is your best friend. I know there's like a lot of people out there that, you know, post videos of them doing a slide, and you can just watch it, and of course it's step by step. Of course you have like your lab book where you can go back and reference from it, and then like you kind of get like a visual of how you're supposed to be doing the slides and stuff like that. And of course Google is your best friend when you're trying to figure out how a certain slide is supposed to look like. You know, just do your research, you guys. And you know, the internet has lots of useful resources, like how I said, YouTube, Quizlet, of course Google in order for you to be like searching up the images that you need for you to get like an idea of how your slides are supposed to look like under the microscope and stuff like that. Don't be afraid to use those resources out there, you guys. If you are like, you know, struggling in lab, there were times where I would be struggling in lab, but you know, for me, watching YouTube videos on how to do certain that I completely forgot was I would watch YouTube videos. I'll probably link down the YouTuber that I did watch. I think his name is Edward K. I do not know how to pronounce his last name, but I'll probably link him down below for any of you guys that were wondering. I watched his videos, you guys, and his videos were exactly the same slides that my professor personally would give us. You know, I would have watched this YouTuber you know, when I felt like I didn't really understand the concept really well. Of course, like I would record and stuff and, you know, use my other resources, but there was times where like I just would not get the material really well. So of course I would go on YouTube and, you know, I would watch this guy, and his videos were exactly like if I was, you know, going to class, just because like how I told you guys, those slides were the exact same slides that my professor would give us. So I would just watch his videos. I know sometimes they're like long and they're up to 45 minutes, but you know, I would watch them and that would help me out also and stuff like that. So basically those are all my study tips and basically any tips that I can give out to you guys. I'm hoping you guys did enjoy this video, and you know, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. Of course, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and follow me on Instagram. And like how I said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, you guys.